fight through the irritation and still learn something good today. All right. Our gospel lesson for the day is the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verses 24 through 37. Hear this good word. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence a secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was Greek, born of Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. "First, let the children eat all they want," he told her. "For it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Lord," she replied, "even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "For such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found her daughter lying in bed, and the demon was gone. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and to the region of Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside and away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers in the man's ears. Then he spat and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, "Ephphatha," which means be opened. At this, the man's ears were open and his tongue was loose, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about him. People were overwhelmed with amazement. "He has done everything well," they said. "He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." This passage reveals to us a very human Jesus experience. When I was in seminary, there was two kinds of Christology, which Christology is the study of Christ. High Christology is Jesus was so much God there was hardly anything human in him. The other is low Christology, which is so human that it's hard to recognize the divine in him. And my professors would say it's better to err on the high than on the low. But I want to tell you, my Christology is more low than it is high because I can relate to a Jesus like this. Jesus was tired. He was tired. He needed to rest. Now, rest and sleep are two different things. We can get a good night's sleep, but if we're constantly caught up in stress or work, whatever, we can still feel overwhelmed. Jesus was tired. He went to a house to get away and to rest and to get away from everything for a while. While he was there eating, a Gentile woman, Syro-Phoenician, came and fell at his feet, which is a very humble thing to do, and begged him to heal her daughter, who was possessed by an unclean spirit, and then later in the passage it's called demon. Basically, both are the same thing. An unclean spirit or a demon in the first century was not some devil from the deep abyss that possessed an individual. It was anything that could not be explained was considered an unclean spirit or a demon. All right? There's another gospel story where a man brings his son to Jesus and says he's possessed by an unclean spirit or a demon. He falls at Jesus' feet and he starts having a convulsion, right? Well, we know in this century that there was an epileptic seizure. But in the first century, he was possessed by a demon. So I just want to bring that to your attention because there's been so much, movie making and storytelling about these creatures from the dark abyss who possess us. You know why we put our hand over our mouth when we yawn? Because it was believed once upon a time that demons entered into our body through our open spaces. So if you open your mouth to yawn, that was an opportunity for a demon to come into your body. All right? It sounds rather silly now, doesn't it? But that's the case here. Her daughter was possessed by something. And she comes to Jesus begging him to heal her. Then Jesus does something that I absolutely cannot stand, and it seems to be way outside of his character, at least the Jesus that we know. He calls her and her daughter dogs. Now, in a literal sense, the Greek word here is puppies. But it's not, in the first century, dogs were not lovely little creatures we take for pets and that we just love to cuddle with, or we send off to a retreat center somewhere to have a good time while we go on vacation. Dogs were scavenger animals and were not held in high regard. So to call you a dog in the first century was not a compliment. Jesus calls her and her daughter dogs. And he says to her, that the bread I have to offer is for my children only. It's not right for me to give my bread to the dogs. What it seems to me is that Jesus at this moment of time was having a very bad moment. All right? It's part of the curse of being famous, isn't it? When I see famous people in public, and I see them with their families, or I see them with friends, the last thing in the world I do is run up to them to try to talk to them and get an autograph, especially if I see them in a restaurant. And that's not happened a lot of times because I don't run around with famous people. But there have been occasions when I have seen a very famous person, and when I see them, if our eyes meet, I just nod and smile, and they do the same, but I leave them alone. Because I figure they probably would love nothing more than just have a lovely, intimate moment with their friends, right? Without somebody coming up to them, oh, I love your work, I thought you were great and such, or would you sign my napkin? Yeah, I just don't do it, right? Jesus was famous. Jesus was famous. And when she came up to him and asked him for help, it irritated him. He seems to have been hungry, tired, and grumpy. And those three emotions typically all go together, do they not? It's like, someone give that man a Snickers bar, please, right? Oh my goodness, Jesus, you're out of character, man. How many moms do we have here today? I mean, those of you virtually, yeah, moms, lift up your hands. All right. Every species on this planet, if something messing with a mom's baby, what happens? You don't mess with mama's baby, right? I know when I was growing up, something happened to me at school. A teacher did something that I thought was unjust, or I got in trouble for something I didn't do. I went home and I told my mom. And she would look at me. She would tell me the absolute truth. Because when I go to the school to tear the schoolhouse down, if you're lying to me and I look like a fool, it's coming back on you, all right? Tell me the absolute truth before I go tear the schoolhouse down. Right? Now, she never literally tore the schoolhouse down, but you get the point. Someone messed with her baby boy, and someone was going to have a reckoning that day, all right? That's the way moms are. So let me ask you, all you moms, if you knew that there was a person who could absolutely heal your sick child, and when you asked for help, they insulted you, would you stop? Absolutely not. Because you're going to do whatever it takes to get healing for your baby, right? Absolutely. When this woman made her request, Jesus said to her, first let the children of Israel eat all they want. It is not right to give their bread to the dogs. And then she came back quickly and said, yes, but even the dogs can eat the scraps that fall from the table. So, Jesus, I'm not asking you for everything. I'm not asking you to give up Israel for me. I got a baby who's sick. I know you can heal her. I don't care what it takes. Jesus, please heal my baby. Now, her persistence wins the day, and her wit. But what I find so interesting about this passage is the region where Jesus was visiting. It's in northern Israel, which near the Decapolis, which is a place of 10 Greek cities, 10 Greek cultures. So Jesus was in her hometown. She was not invading his hometown. Of course, a Greek woman would come to him asking for help because he was in a region where there were a lot of Greek women, right? That would be like me going to Edinburgh, Scotland, and being put off because a Scottish person asked me for help, and I say, no, what I got's for Americans only, right? I mean, that's how silly this is. But it was her persistence and her wit that won the day. Many of us, at some point in our life, request a miracle. Am I right? If you haven't yet, give it time. When do we typically request a miracle? It's when something that we're facing seems way beyond anything that we have the resources to deal with, and we need, a divine source to come and save the day for us, right? Unfortunately, humanity, throughout millennia, believed that God, the divine, is like a giant Santa Claus in the sky. And if you've been good girls and boys, which I know all of you have been, you can go to the giant God in the sky and request anything, and God's going to give you what you want when you want it. After all, when we read the Bible stories, some of the people get a miracle like instantly, right? But it doesn't happen like that in life. Most of the miracle stories in the Bible take place because some incredible effort, because someone's incredible effort to get that miracle. So now, let's bring it back to us, because after all, that's who it's about, right? I would imagine that everybody here has some kind of unclean spirit in your life. Something you can't explain. It might be psychological, it might be physical. What is that thing in our lives that we continue to do that sabotage everything we want in love? Right? What is that thing that we can't seem to explain? But yet, even though we know how destructive a particular behavior is, or a particular belief system is, we continue to employ it even when everything in us wants it to go away and stop. I know that when I worked with alcoholics and drug addicts, it seems like when they would make the commitment to stop using drugs or alcohol, it seems like the first 15 days, maybe 20 days, went really, really well. It was week 3 and 4 that the triggers start to come forth. Those of you who are recovering and who have recovered, you know what I'm talking about, right? Oftentimes in the beginning of recovery, you're in a safe place and you're getting all this attention, you're getting all this wonderful information, you've got people around you supporting you, but then a flood of stuff hits you in the face. The same kind of stuff that you've been medicating yourself for years with. Right? And it's almost like at that point in time, the universe, God, the divine spirit, was going to say, how badly do you want sobriety? All right, you say you want it. Now, let's see. It almost seems cruel. But that seems to be the way that we transcend and recover from our unclean spirits. We have to come to a place where we're willing to do whatever it takes to get the miracle and the healing that we desire. To make the desire for a miracle to become a reality, we must do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to get the healing that we desire. The second miracle takes place in Decapolis, which is 10 Greek cities. Once again, full of Greek images, full of Greek customs, full of Greek language. And while Jesus is there, because, well, he was in the region, they brought a man who was deaf and could not speak. We don't know who they were, but all it says is they. there were some people who brought this man to Jesus. And what do we see Jesus do? He takes the man outside of the crowd. Often in the Bible stories, Jesus does not want a lot of brouhaha about the miracles that he creates. Oftentimes when he does miracles for people, he tells them, don't say anything to anyone. So he takes them outside, away from the crowd. Isn't this an incredible contrast to the TV healers that we have? Whoo, no, they want to display. Hallelujah. Slay people in the spirit, knock them in the head and hit them on the floor, someone there to catch them. Because when they do it, it's not the miracle and the healing that they're wanting. What are they wanting? Because it comes pouring in. Oh, yeah. That's why some of them can have, private jets, mansions all over the world. Jesus did not like public display, so he took this man aside. In contrast to the previous miracle, Jesus just spoke a word and it happened, right? In this miracle, Jesus was very hands-on. If I had been that man, I think I would have rather had Jesus just speak the word rather than sticking his fingers in my ears and then sticking his spit on my tongue. But you see, we don't know. Many of us can experience the miraculous in different ways. Some people, all it is just a spoken word. It's consciousness. So others, we need the kinetic, right? We need the touch. Some, it's something that we hear. Others, something that we see. Maybe this man needed that physical touch. He couldn't hear what Jesus was saying, so obviously he couldn't just speak a word and it would happen, right? He needed the touch. See, this is what I love about the stories of Jesus. Now, this is the Jesus that we all know well and we love, right? The Jesus who comes to us where we are and meets our needs where we are. Even if it's in a Greek city, away from the children of Israel, right? And the man's hearing comes back to him. And with the hearing, he finds his voice. And he starts sharing with everybody what incredible experience he just had and the healing he had. And Jesus, stop that. Don't spread it around. Shh. But the more Jesus encouraged him not to say anything, the more he spoke. Here's what I want us to glean from this. Oftentimes, it's the unclean spirits in our life that make us deaf and dumb to the spirit within us. Our spirit is constantly communicating with us. It's just, are we listening? Remember last week I told you there's another Greek word for sin in the Gospels, and it's a Greek word which means not listening. And when we finally start to listen, when we can finally hear and connect to this incredible spirit within us, then we discover our voice. And when we discover our voice, then we cannot be shut up. Some of us spend a whole lifetime speaking words. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you are sharing your voice. Who am I? And now you're hearing it and you're seeing it. The first person that came to my mind when I was reflecting upon this was that lovely young lady from Pakistan. You know who I'm talking about? Malala. She and her father believed, outside of the strict Islamic law, that all girls should be able to be educated. And her thing is that all children around the world should be allowed to be educated. And the extremist fundamentalist in her religion and in her country found her on a bus, shot her in the head to shut her up. But that didn't work, did it? She recovered from her wounds, and guess what? She knew who she was, she knew what her voice was about, and she continues to promote education for girls and children all over the world. You see, that's what happens when we can hear that voice within us, when we are connected to this incredible spirit within us. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention is that in both cases, an individual or they were involved in bringing a person, their case, to Jesus. In other words, the individuals who received the healing miracles had an advocate, right? They had someone helping them. And what I want you to know is that we all have an advocate, our soul. Our soul knows what we need. Our soul will be that driving force to get our attention so that we slow ourselves down, so that we start to listen to that voice within us, and so that we connect with our inner self and with that beautiful divine spirit that is our God. Our soul knows what we need. So the question is, have we become deaf to our inner self? And if so, why? What is the cause? What unclean spirit have we not yet dealt with to allow us to discover not only our inner voice and connection with the divine, but to find our real voice as we share and experience the world around us? We are able to finally speak our truth. So for me, our salvation, sozo, is becoming whole, complete, and liberated when we use persistence and commitment to get the miracle that we need in our life. It requires opening our ears and becoming conscious of our inner spirit, and it is then that we can discover our voice, and it is then that we will never, ever be silenced again. Thus ends the lesson. Amen. Today, we're going to celebrate one who would not let his voice be silenced, not even on a cross, not even on a grave. And his voice is still heard 2,000 years later. I just read a story to you, didn't I? Jesus is that incredible teacher, spirit, that can help us to connect to that beautiful soul that's in each of us that's connected, I believe, directly to God. So let us, as a faith community, once again, commit ourselves, communion, of not just ingesting the elements, but allowing the story, the reality, the teachings, to become a part of every fiber of our body, every thought in our mind. On the night of his betrayal, Jesus took the bread and he broke it in two, and he said to his disciples, "This broken bread represents my body, which is broken for you. Every time you eat bread together, do it in memory of me." And that same evening, he took the wine and he poured it into the cup. And he said, "This wine represents my blood, which is poured out for you and all humanity." In the first century, to give one's blood was to give one's life. So Jesus is saying, I am giving you my whole living, my whole life, so that you may experience a new covenant with the divine. And this new covenant is not based on rules and regulations and doctrines and memorization. It's based on what? Love. It's based on what? All right, we'll give you one more cue. It's based on what? Love. Not just any kind of love, unconditional love, agape, love given for love's sake, regardless of the response. That is what this communion is all about. So, our ushers are going to guide each section to each table. Take the elements. They're all separated out. They're in cups. The bread's in cups. Toothpicks, the juice, in tiny little containers. They're in the trays. And let us now not only commune with one another, but with that incredible loving spirit we call God. Come, the table is ready. All right, my friends. God bless you all. Peace to you all. And purpose to you all. Share your voice because you know who you are. And you know that spirit that continues to